Okay, so right now I'd like to talk a little bit about just sanitation and maintaining proper hygiene, and talk about how do we do that with our products, and what's the best way to really handle each one of the different items in our product line, and how do we keep those things clean, and how do we make sure that as makeup artists and as professionals we are not only teaching the students to do it properly, but we're also kind of creating this culture of a sanitary workspace, a clean environment where a client never has to worry about some foreign object or some kind of growth or anything disgusting in the makeup or the brushes or any of that kind of thing. So we really want to promote this idea that our makeup artists, Mud's makeup artists, are very clean and very sanitary, and make sure that their product is always clean, the brushes are always clean, and those aspects of being professional. So I'd like to just talk about briefly with you guys. You probably already know all of this, but I just want to talk briefly about how do we go about doing that and keeping things clean. So first and foremost, there's personally. Personally, how do we maintain a proper hygiene, all that stuff? Well, we gotta brush our teeth, we gotta make sure we shower, we gotta make sure that we're wearing clean clothes, we gotta make sure that there's no odor, or even wearing too much perfume or too much cologne can cause a problem for a performer or somebody else we're working with. We have to communicate that with students. I've had to do a couple of those really uncomfortable conversations with students in the past about, hey, you need to shower every day when you come to school. It's a really uncomfortable conversation, but it is something as teachers we need to make sure the students are doing, and make sure that they are staying clean and not having that they're not doing any of those things. So that personally they're handling their personal grooming and hygiene properly. In terms of product, there are a couple of ways that we are going to maintain a sanitary workspace. There's a couple of rules that we typically follow and that I like to follow. First and foremost, I like to set up a station, make sure the station is clean and organized. I have my brushes set up on a towel so that the brushes are off the surface, off the countertop, and that they're not touching anything else, and that something's not cross-contaminating. I make sure I've cleaned this surface. I make sure I've used hand sanitizer. I make sure there's hand sanitizer there at the station. With the product itself, all of the tools that are clean should be on one side of the station. Once a tool is used or is dirtied in any way, that tool needs to move to the opposite side of the station. This will just help us to create a little separation between clean tools and dirty tools. We know not to grab anything from the left side of the station. And on the same token, everything on the right side of the station will be clean and ready for us to use. It's kind of like how a doctor might do this. They have one area where the tools are clean and one area where the tools are dirty. And we want to make sure that we're not cross-contaminating. You don't want to use a brush and just simply throw it down in the middle of the station, and it will just simply create more of a mess and more of a problem. So beyond tools and keeping those separated in terms of dirty or clean, we also want to make sure that we are making sure our makeup's not contaminated. So how do we do this? Well, all cream products we scoop out. So we take the cream product and we, with a palette knife, scoop it out of the container and transfer it to a palette so that we can work from the palette. I can take my metal palette and with my brush work right from it, go right to the performer, and then go back into my palette, and there's no cross-contamination with someone else. This makeup that's on the palette will ultimately get wiped off and cleaned, the brush will be cleaned, and the cream product that's in the container will never be contaminated. So always, 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 all cream products are dispensed onto a pallet. Powder products typically are dispensed a little bit differently. If it's a loose powder, that's easy. It's just transferred onto the palette or onto a powder puff, something along those lines. If it's a pressed powder, the accepted method of keeping it clean is to work directly from the pressed powder. We're talking about eyeshadows and cheek colors and products, the dual finish powders, the bronzers. We work directly with the brush, a clean brush of course. Work right from it. We can go to the performer, go back to the container, go back to the performer as many times as we need to. But after we're done, the product needs to be spritzed with at least 98% alcohol. So we're going to take a spray bottle of 98% alcohol and we're going to spritz our product and just kind of coat it with a little bit of alcohol. Don't saturate it. That will cause problems for the product. But just lightly mist it to kill any bacteria that might be sitting on the surface. Most likely, because it's a powder product, there's no water in it, there's no issues like that, you're going to find that the powder, it's very hard for something to grow in it or cause us a problem or anything along those lines. So cream, we pull from the container. Powder, we can work directly from the container. Anything that comes in a tube is dispensed directly onto a palette. So mascara, brow fix, lip glaze, anything like that that's in a tube form needs to be squirted out onto the palette and we work directly from it. 9 times out of 10 we're going to be working from a palette and using a palette knife and brushes and things like that on a palette. Anytime we can get the makeup out of the container and onto the palette, the better off we're going to be. Pencils. Pencils, we're obviously going to have to work right on the person with a pencil, but there's a couple things that we can do. We can make sure that the pencil sharpener is always cleaned with at least 98% alcohol, and we can always make sure that we're sharpening the pencil. So typically when I'm done using a pencil, I will always sharpen it. That will remove the pencil part that touched the person. And then after I'm done sharpening the pencil, I'll go back and I will clean the pencil sharpener with a little bit of at least 98% alcohol. Typically I'm using 99% alcohol. Brushes. Brushes must be cleaned with a brush cleaner. So something that's actually going to kill the bacteria. There's something that we have to be very, very cautious of with brush cleaner though. Brush cleaner can be harmful for the person. If we're cleaning a brush and then we're going right back to the performer's face, brush cleaner takes a long time to kind of evaporate out of the brush and can cause irritation on a performer or a person or anybody we're touching, especially on the eyelids. That can be a real issue if we're not careful. So be careful using brush cleaner. We always want to clean our brushes. I always suggest to students, you might want to have more than one of that type of brush if you're doing multiple makeups in a very short period of time. Otherwise, you want to make sure you clean your brushes very well with the brush cleaner and allow them to dry completely. If you do need to use your brush immediately between two people and we do have to clean it, my suggestion is to clean it with 99% alcohol or at least 98% alcohol. That 99% alcohol will kill all the bacteria and all the problems with it. The difference between the alcohol and the brush cleaner, alcohol can be very drying and damaging to the brush, but if you only have to do it once or twice, it's not going to cause any major issues. Brush cleaner has conditioners in it, so typically that's good for the brush. But that's also means it's going to take longer to get out of the brush than say alcohol. So we always want to make sure we're cleaning our brushes. All of our tools need to be cleaned off with 99% alcohol or 98% alcohol and make sure that we are not leaving any makeup behind or any of that stuff. Sponges, powder puffs, mascara wands, all of those items have to be disposed of. When we're dealing with mascara, we never use the cool wand that comes with the mascara as a professional. We're always having to use a disposable mascara wand, and we're using that again from the palette. We're taking a tube, squirting it out, use the mascara wand on the palette, and then once the mascara is used and done, we have to throw that away. And that goes for any of the disposable items, sponges, puffs. We don't wash these things, we just throw them away. I think that's going to wrap up everything that you may find in your makeup kit. If there's anything else that might come up, let us know. Some things like liquid liners, you might have to transfer to the, wet them, like the cake out of it. Wet it first with a clean brush, and then transfer the product to the palette to work onto a person's face rather than straight from the container. So some of these things are going to be require a little bit of adjustment, but for the most part we're working from a palette, and we're always dispensing the product onto a palette or onto a tool in some way.